Understanding that is key to understanding what's going to happen in the future. So if we get that wrong, then we're going to get the future wrong. That's why I think it's important to identify the results of basically compromise, spiritual
Mm-hmm.
compromise with demonic activity, and that is exactly, I think, what we see today happening in our world today. Is we
Well, that
see pastors and ministers who are saying things that are diametrically opposed to God's word.
Yeah, and we're talking about the compromise. So that's kind of what I wanted to go back to with the Nephilim. And you're a good person to ask, so I keep wanting to go back to it. So I originally, back in the day, when I first became a Christian, I was taught by one of the guys that was kind of one, the main teachers that I knew, that they were fallen angels. And, he referenced like, hey, the principle of first reference, right? So you go into the scriptures, you see like, where's this phrase first used? How is it used? It was used in Job. It's talking about, it seems to be clearly talking about angels, right? They were there at the dawn of time, rejoicing when God created the world. And then you get some texts in the New Testament that talk about angels not keeping their first abode and angels sinning in certain ways, like what seems to be in some sort of connection to sexual sins of humans,
Mm-hmm.
right? So he goes on this thing. And you're like, okay, well, I mean, that seems plausible. I believe in the supernatural. Yes, it seems weird. Like you said, a metaphysical issue of angels. So what did they do? Like, did they assume human bodies? Like, how did all that
Yeah,
work? I don't know, blah, blah, blah. But then,
exactly.
but
Yeah.
then I had, but then I had a college professor make this point, and I've never been able to really track down like a source for it. But he was a historian, and he talked about that he believed, based off of ancient Near Eastern sources, that it was in reference to essentially the ancient cultures learning some sort of like genetic modification practices, essentially like breeding practices, right? Like you could breed a
Interesting.
dog, right? You
Yeah.
could like you
Yeah.
breed certain. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our like superstar people and we're gonna breed them with other superstar people, so that way we can keep that sort of purity or whatever, or keep on
Interesting.
producing. It's more likely that you put two tall people together, it's more likely you're
Yeah.
going to get a tall kid. So that's what he was saying. And it didn't really catch me at the time, but then I started trying to research it later, and he had died. And I'm like, I don't have any source for this, but that seems pretty reasonable. Like I could see that
Yeah.
happening.
Sort of like eugenics. Sounds like eugenics to
Yeah. So have
me.
you ever heard anything like that in
I
your
have
research?
never come across that at all. In the ancient, I've got a ton of stuff on ancient Near Eastern culture, and especially Mesopotamian culture. Living here in Chicago, I have access to the ISAC Museum, and which formerly Oriental Institute. Some of the top scholars in the world, Jacobson, who I quoted earlier, taught at the Oriental Institute. It was founded by James Henry Breasted. These are the guys who, just so you people know, the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute, they have several dictionaries, multi-volume dictionaries that they have created. And these are not dictionaries of just like, one of them is the Assyrian dictionary of the Assyrian language that overtook almost 100 years to create. I think they may be done with it now. They also have the Hittite dictionary and the Coptic dictionary. And I have never come across anything of any kind of selective breeding or anything like that. But there is quite a lot of extensive evidence of ancient Near Eastern culture. In fact, there's another good book by another scholar called, by the name of Henry Frankfurt, called Kingship and the Gods. And there's this, what I think's going on, Billy, is that's it's a great, interesting theory. I've never heard that before, and I'm open to it. I just don't know. I've never read any. I've never come across in my readings of primary sources or secondary sources of anything, any kind of selective breeding ideas. I don't know if maybe they did understand that. I never come across that in my reading of Mesopotamian literature. But in any case, what I think's going on is that we do know from historical sources very solidly, and we have extensive writings on this from the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, that the kings of these nations were intimately interconnected with their gods. In fact, they were representative of the gods on earth. So I think a case could be made that if these foreign gods from Mesopotamia, such as Marduk and Ishtar, and in Egypt, like Osiris and Amun Ra and Isis and all these things, are actually demons behind the scenes, and that they're ruling in the place of these kings and being influenced. And sometimes the kings had to go in Egypt. There's this elaborate process, and they have these festivals. There's the Sed festival and the festival of Opet, and in which the king, there's a lot of necromancy and speaking with the dead and all kinds of things, and possibly even some hallucinogenic stuff. So I could certainly see where the demonic and the spiritual would be influencing the kings. And I honestly think that's true today.